Eli Draven awoke to the faint hum of machinery and the soft flicker of lights along the walls of the orbital station. The cold air smelled of metal and recycled oxygen. For a moment, he could not remember where he was or who he was, and the emptiness around him felt heavier than space itself. Slowly, memories returned. The endless wars, the collapse of human civilization, the battles that left entire worlds in ruins. He was the last human. The knowledge of it pressed on him like gravity. He swung his legs over the edge of the narrow bunk and stood, muscles stiff from long hibernation. The station was small, hidden in the shadow of a shattered planet. Its existence had been a secret for decades, and Eli had been its only occupant. He had survived because he knew how to survive. The ingenuity of humanity, honed over millennia, had become second nature. But solitude was a heavy companion. He moved through the corridors with careful steps, his boots echoing softly. Then the signal came. It was unlike anything he had ever received. Not a distress call, not a war alert, but a message coded in a way that suggested intelligence, elegance, and purpose. He paused, staring at the console, fingers hovering over the controls. The display shimmered, and for the first time in years, a holographic image flickered to life. The figure that appeared was tall and regal, her form both humanoid and alien. Her skin glimmered with an iridescent pattern, and her eyes burned with intensity. In her hand, she held a sword that seemed to glow with contained energy, its edges sharp and precise. She spoke, her voice resonating with authority and curiosity. "Teach me what you know." A conqueror asking a human for knowledge was unheard of. The galaxy had seen humans as dangerous once, and now all that remained was him. Could this be a trap? Or had the universe finally taken notice of human ingenuity in a way no one had before? Caution told him to flee, to hide and preserve what little humanity remained. But something deeper, something he had carried through centuries of conflict, stirred inside him. Curiosity, opportunity, perhaps a chance to ensure that humanity's spirit would survive even if humanity itself was gone. Eli tapped the console, tracing patterns on the holographic interface. The image solidified, showing more of her ship, a massive structure that dwarfed his small station. The alien queen, Celira, commanded a fleet that could destroy worlds without effort. And yet here she was, asking to learn from him. He took a deep breath. "If I go," he murmured to himself, "I go as the last human, but I will not go unprepared." Every piece of equipment had been designed to maximize efficiency. Every plan was calculated for survival. Despite his solitude, the thrill of preparation brought a sense of purpose he had not felt in years. By the time he boarded his small stealth craft, the orbital station had faded into the blackness behind him. Stars stretched infinitely, each one a reminder of what had been lost. Humanity's colonies, its cities, its dreams, all gone. Yet among the cold stars, a spark of hope remained. The journey to Celira's flagship was tense. Sensors picked up nothing unusual at first, but Eli knew the galaxy was silent for a reason. The Thrin had mastered technology far beyond human capability. He kept his engines low and shields active, slipping through asteroid fields and debris with careful precision. Every maneuver reminded him of humanity's greatest skill, adaptability. When machines failed, humans had learned to improvise. When danger appeared, humans had learned to think, not react. Hours passed. The massive alien ship finally came into view, a shadow against the glow of a nearby nebula. Its surface was alive with motion, pulsating as if it were breathing. Weapons turrets glinted, and the curvature of the ship seemed almost organic. Eli felt the weight of the centuries of human pride that had led him to this moment. He was alone, but he was also human, and humans were dangerous when underestimated. Docking was a silent, tense procedure. The airlock opened with a hiss, revealing a hallway that shimmered with the alien material of the ship. Eli stepped inside, feeling the hum of the vessel resonate through his body. He was careful, observing patterns in movement, subtle gestures that might indicate threats. Nothing moved aggressively, but the sense of observation was constant. Celira awaited him in a large chamber, the walls glowing with soft bioluminescence. She held her sword casually, yet the energy within it radiated a sense of power that could cut through steel and bone alike. Her eyes scanned him with intelligence, curiosity, and a hint of challenge. "You are smaller than I expected," she said, and her words were not meant to insult but to provoke thought. "But I sense something different in you, a mind that calculates, adapts, and survives. That is what I wish to learn. Knowledge can be a weapon as well as a gift." Or he could teach, ensuring that something of human ingenuity endured, even among an alien species that had conquered countless worlds. Eli stepped forward, keeping his hands visible. "Very well," he said. "But understand this, if you betray what I teach, it will not be for power alone. The cost will be far greater than you imagine." Her soldiers observed from the edges of the room, curiosity mixed with suspicion. Humans had been thought extinct for generations. Now one stood before them, alive and daring to teach their queen. Eli noticed subtle things about Celira, her discipline, her strategic thinking, and her ability to absorb complex ideas quickly. But he also noticed what her empire lacked: creativity, intuition, moral flexibility. They were creatures of strength and logic, but without the human spark that allowed improvisation, empathy, and unpredictable innovation. The first day ended with Celira lowering her sword, her expression unreadable. "You are remarkable," she said softly, "and dangerous. I have never met a being like you." Yet in this moment he held the possibility to shape the galaxy's future, not through conquest but through teaching. Through knowledge, through the spark of what it meant to be human. Somewhere deep in the ship, Celira stood before the viewport, watching stars pass by at unimaginable speed. She held the sword in one hand, her mind already turning over everything she had learned. She did not yet understand the full power of what she had encountered, but she sensed the potential to change everything. Eli drifted into uneasy sleep, the hum of alien engines beneath him, the unknown stretching endlessly ahead. He was alone, yes, but he was human. And humans, even in solitude, had a way of surviving against impossible odds. The journey had only begun, and already the galaxy was watching. Eli Draven stepped carefully into the wide chamber of Celira's flagship, his eyes scanning every surface, every shadow. The walls shimmered like living metal, and alien symbols pulsed softly along the edges. He had never seen technology like this. Every movement of the ship, every whisper of power seemed alive. And at the center of it all stood Celira, the alien queen, holding her sword as if it were an extension of herself. "Today you will show me your ways," she said, her voice firm but curious. "Not by words alone. I want to see your mind in action. I want to see what makes a human different." Humans had survived against odds that no other species could endure. Their strength lay not in raw power, but in intelligence, adaptability, and the ability to think when others only acted. He would have to show her that. Celira moved to the center of the room and gestured toward a holographic battlefield that appeared instantly. It was a simulation, but realistic, an entire cityscape populated with hundreds of automated soldiers and vehicles. The simulation shimmered and pulsed as if waiting for them. "You will demonstrate your tactics," Celira said. "If you succeed, I will learn. If you fail, I will destroy you." But he had faced worse odds on Earth. In wars humans had lost and survived only through cunning. He nodded. He stepped forward, studying the holographic battlefield. The enemy forces were organized, predictable, and heavily armed. If he attacked directly, his units would be destroyed instantly. But humans had learned long ago that brute force was rarely the answer. Strategy, misdirection, improvisation, these were the weapons of the human mind. Eli began issuing commands. The holographic soldiers moved as he directed, not through sheer strength but through clever tactics. He set traps, created diversions, and manipulated the environment to his advantage. The enemy forces advanced, but he anticipated every move. At each turn, the simulation shifted, responding intelligently, yet Eli's mind stayed faster. Celira watched closely, her eyes narrowing. She moved her sword, adjusting the energy field of the simulation, testing Eli. She tried to create impossible scenarios, overwhelming odds, unpredictable attacks, and yet every time Eli adapted. "Impressive," she admitted, her tone almost reluctant. "You anticipate, you plan, you deceive. These are human traits I have studied in texts, but seeing them applied, it is different." Buildings collapsed, fires spread, and enemy forces multiplied. Yet Eli's tactics kept his units alive. He moved with precision, directing forces to weak points, luring enemies into traps, and using the environment to create advantages. Celira adjusted her own attacks, but every time Eli countered with solutions she had never considered. Hours passed. Sweat ran down Eli's forehead, his muscles tense, but he did not waver. His mind raced, calculating, predicting, improvising. Celira's expression shifted from curiosity to fascination. She had faced countless commanders and warriors, yet none had challenged her like this. The human mind was unpredictable, creative, and adaptable in ways her empire had never seen. At one point, Celira paused the simulation. "You are different," she said quietly. "You do not act like other species I have conquered. You do not rely on strength or numbers. You rely on something else, something I cannot yet define. We think about consequences, morality, and the lives affected by our choices." If she truly learned, she might become a leader who understood not just power but responsibility. Perhaps, in some strange way, humanity could continue through her. He began slowly, explaining concepts of strategy, ethics, and improvisation. He used examples from Earth's history, battles won against impossible odds, and the ways humans had survived by thinking differently than their enemies. Celira listened intently, asking questions, challenging his assumptions, and testing her own understanding. "You value life," she observed, "even enemies. That is what makes us dangerous, not just our strength, but our decisions." She began applying his lessons not just in simulations, but in subtle adjustments to how her officers planned operations. The rigid, hierarchical nature of Thrin society allowed for little flexibility, but she was bending it, testing the limits of their loyalty and adaptability. Eli also noticed subtle cracks in her empire. Some officers whispered, hesitant to follow her unconventional methods. Others watched with curiosity, intrigued by the human approach. The seeds of change were planted, and Eli realized that his lessons could ripple farther than he imagined. By the end of the first day, exhaustion weighed heavily on him. His body was tired, but his mind was alive with possibilities. He had survived countless battles, but this was different. Here, survival meant teaching, shaping, and influencing a species far stronger than his own, and yet he felt a sense of purpose he had not known in decades. Celira approached him as he rested, her sword at her side. "You are unlike any being I have met," she said softly. "Your mind, your reasoning, your humanity. It is a weapon more powerful than any I have wielded. Perhaps even in the darkness of the galaxy, humanity could leave a legacy, not through conquest or force, but through ideas, morality, and intelligence." That night, as he lay in the small quarters provided for him, Eli reflected on what he had accomplished. He was the last human, and yet he had begun something that could outlive him. A spark of human ingenuity had been planted in one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. It was fragile, yes, and could be extinguished if he made a mistake. But it existed. He thought of the countless humans who had lived and died, of their resilience, creativity, and courage. Their legacy was more than history. It was a way of thinking, a way of surviving, a way of seeing the world. And now in some form it could live on through Celira. Outside his quarters, the ship moved silently through the void, stars streaking past like distant fires. Eli drifted into a light sleep, his mind alive with plans for tomorrow. The lessons would continue, the challenges would grow, and the galaxy would watch, whether it knew it or not. He was alone, yes, but he was human. And humans, even when facing impossible odds, had a way of surviving. They adapted, they learned, and they endured. That was the gift and the danger of humanity. And for the first time in decades, Eli felt something he had not felt in a long time: hope. Eli Draven awoke to the soft hum of the flagship, the pale glow of alien lights filling the room. He stretched, feeling the soreness of yesterday's exercises and simulations, but he welcomed it. Every ache reminded him that he was alive, that he was human, and that humans endured what others could not. Today promised more challenges, challenges of a different kind. He stepped into the main chamber where Celira awaited, her sword resting lightly at her side. Her posture was relaxed, yet every line of her body spoke of power, discipline, and command. Eli noticed her attention lingered on him longer than before, not just with curiosity, but with genuine interest. Something was changing in her, a subtle shift that he could sense. "Good morning, Eli," she said. "I want to continue today. I want to understand more than strategy. I want to understand the essence of humanity. That is what has allowed us to survive against species far stronger than ourselves." He began with the concept of observation and adaptability. Using the holographic simulation from yesterday, he altered it slightly. This time, he removed predictable enemy movements, introduced variables like unexpected weather, collapsing terrain, and civilian populations that could be harmed. "You cannot plan for every possibility," Eli explained. "Humans survive by observing, adapting, and improvising. You use rules and certainty. Humans use judgment and creativity. That is why we endure." He diverted forces, created traps, and predicted enemy patterns. But more than that, he began considering collateral effects, calculating which actions preserved life while still achieving objectives. "You are cautious," Salira noted, yet effective. Most beings would strike blindly for victory. Humans learn from mistakes, and we value more than just winning. We value survival, progress, and the lives of others, even when it is difficult. Salira listened intently, asking questions, challenging him, and applying the lessons immediately in simulations. Eli realized that the Thrin, despite their strength and technology, had never considered morality a factor in leadership. They acted with precision, but without compassion or long-term foresight. Salira's curiosity was unusual for her species. She did not just absorb the lessons, she began to experiment with them. Meanwhile, the other Thrin aboard the ship observed quietly. Some were suspicious, others intrigued. A few whispered to each other, questioning the wisdom of the Queen's interest in a single human. Eli could feel their scrutiny, but he did not flinch. Humans had always endured skepticism, hostility, and even betrayal, and yet they survived. By midday, Eli introduced lessons in innovation. He presented a scenario in which standard weapons and tactics failed, and resources were limited. Salira's initial instinct was to rely on brute force, but Eli guided her to think differently, to use her environment, to combine technology in unorthodox ways, and to anticipate enemy reactions creatively. Salira's sword hummed softly as she experimented, cutting through holographic barriers with precision, testing Eli's ideas. She began to understand a human principle that no simulation could fully teach, the willingness to embrace uncertainty and adapt in real time. "You think differently than any being I have known," Salira said, lowering her sword. "Your mind is alive. It searches, questions, improvises. It is dangerous and fascinating." Humanity survives not through destruction, but through learning, adapting, and understanding consequences. That is why we endure. Threats in space were not predictable, and he could feel the danger pressing. Salira's expression hardened. "Prepare yourself," she said. "These are loyalists from my own empire. They do not trust my fascination with human methods. They will challenge our authority." Some Thrin generals viewed the Queen's actions as weakness, and their loyalty was fragile. He realized that survival here would not just require knowledge, but diplomacy and cunning, skills humans excelled in. The enemy forces approached, a fleet of small but heavily armed ships. Eli assessed the situation quickly, calculating distances, weapon ranges, and possible tactics. Then he spoke. "Use unpredictability," he advised. "They expect strength. Give them intelligence, use misdirection, divide them. They rely on obedience and protocol. If you disrupt that, they will hesitate." Eli guided her through the choices, combining his human intuition with her alien technology. The engagement was tense. Ships darted through space like living creatures, weapons fired, shields flared. Eli watched patterns, calculated probabilities, and predicted enemy maneuvers. Salira adapted instantly, applying lessons from him and modifying tactics in real time. Together, they began turning the tide against her own loyalist forces. "Humans think several steps ahead," Eli said as he watched enemy ships falter. "We consider not only the immediate effect, but the ripple consequences. That is why we survive where others fail." Her officers followed her lead, their hesitation turning to cautious curiosity. Some began to see the value in the human lessons Eli had taught. By nightfall, the threat was neutralized. Enemy ships retreated, some destroyed, others confused and demoralized. Salira's fleet remained intact, her authority unchallenged but now tempered by a new perspective. She turned to Eli, exhaustion and admiration in her eyes. "You have shown me something no being in my empire could. You have taught me adaptation, creativity, and judgment. You are remarkable. That is all I have done, show you a glimpse of what humanity was. How you use it will shape countless lives." He also understood the dangers. Not all of Salira's officers were convinced. Some whispered in corners, plotting, doubting, waiting for an opportunity to exploit the Queen's fascination with him. Survival would require more than teaching. It would require vigilance, cunning, and trust built carefully over time. Eli looked out at the stars from a small viewport. The galaxy stretched endlessly, a mixture of darkness and light, danger and possibility. As the last human, he carried not only his own life, but the legacy of an entire species. That legacy was more than knowledge. It was thought, creativity, morality, and resilience. It was what set humans apart. Tomorrow, he would continue to teach, to guide, and to adapt. But tonight, he allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. Humanity had endured in him. And through his lessons, it might endure further not through force, but through ideas, understanding, and the spark of human ingenuity. Salira's ship moved silently through space, carrying the last human and the beginnings of a new perspective in an empire that had never known humility, innovation, or ethical reasoning. The ripple of change had begun, and Eli understood that his role was far from over. There were challenges ahead, and the galaxy would not remain static. But for the first time in decades, hope existed, not just for him but for the idea of humanity itself. The last human had begun teaching, and the universe was listening. Eli Draven woke to the faint vibration of the flagship, a subtle shudder that ran through the metal like a warning. Something was wrong. His instincts, honed over decades of human survival, immediately sharpened. He swung his legs over the side of the bunk, muscles tense, and moved silently through the corridors. Every step was cautious, every sound analyzed. As he approached the main chamber, the source of the disturbance became clear. Lights flickered and panels glowed erratically. The ship's AI reported malfunctions in several critical systems: navigation, shields, and life support. Someone had tampered with the ship. Eli's mind raced. Sabotage was subtle, deliberate, and dangerous. He found Salira already in the chamber, her sword glowing faintly in readiness. Her expression was calm, yet her eyes betrayed concern. "It seems my loyalists have acted," she said. "They do not trust your teachings. They see it as weakness. This is survival, not combat practice. Their aim is not victory. They want fear, chaos, and to undermine you. Humans survive by using obstacles as opportunities. Let's turn this to our advantage." Salira's soldiers were hesitant, some openly defying orders, unsure whether to follow the Queen's unusual methods or rely on old protocols. Eli observed them carefully, reading their intentions, predicting hesitations, and using human intuition to influence their decisions. "Confidence inspires loyalty," Eli said quietly. "If they see you lead with certainty, even unconventional methods, they will follow." Some still doubted, but the immediate crisis forced unity. Eli guided them, showing how to prioritize repairs, create improvised systems, and reroute power in ways the Thrinn had never considered. The first challenge was restoring navigation. The ship's engines were operational but unstable. Normally, the Thrinn relied on precise calculations and rigid procedures. Eli suggested something different: use intuition alongside calculation, anticipate potential failures, and plan for multiple contingencies. He directed small teams to test alternate routes and reroute energy in real time. Salira followed his instructions with precision, wielding her sword as a tool to interface with systems and direct personnel. The combination of human improvisation and Thrinn technology was unprecedented. Slowly, the flagship regained stability. Next, they addressed the shields. The saboteurs had introduced conflicting codes, creating unstable energy fields. Eli analyzed the problem using logic and intuition, instructing the engineers to create adaptive shield patterns that could respond dynamically to changes. Salira implemented these changes, her sword glowing as she projected energy through the system, guiding it like a conductor directing an orchestra. By the time they reached life support, the crew had begun to trust Eli's guidance. Humans, after all, had survived impossible odds by thinking differently, and they were beginning to see that his methods were effective. For the first time, Salira's officers witnessed a combination of intelligence, creativity, and leadership that transcended species. While systems were being repaired, Eli and Salira took a moment to assess their situation. "This is more than sabotage," Eli said. "It is a test. They are testing your willingness to change, your ability to adapt, and your leadership. They expect you to fail. But humans do not fail in the same way others do. We find solutions where none seem possible." They created contingency plans, anticipated sabotage methods, and devised defensive strategies. Salira absorbed every lesson, her movements confident, her mind sharp. By the end of the discussion, she had begun to act not as a ruler of an empire accustomed to obedience, but as a leader who could think creatively under pressure. Suddenly, alarms blared again. A small fleet of ships, loyalist forces from her own empire, approached. They were armed, maneuvering aggressively, and intended to test her resolve. Eli assessed the situation instantly. Direct confrontation would be reckless. Brute force alone could not ensure survival. "Listen carefully," Eli said. "We cannot fight them as they expect. They anticipate strength and discipline. We will act unpredictably. We will divide them, manipulate their expectations, and strike where they are weakest. Humans survive by being unexpected, by using intelligence over power. Ships moved in deceptive patterns, creating illusions of vulnerability, while hidden forces prepared ambushes. Energy fields shifted dynamically, guided by improvisation rather than fixed calculations. The enemy fleet attacked. Laser beams cut through space, shields flared, and explosions lit the void. Yet Eli's strategies worked. The Loyalist forces, trained to expect traditional Thryn tactics, faltered. Celira's fleet responded with precision, striking unpredictably, adapting continuously, and overwhelming the attackers in ways they could not anticipate. During the battle, Eli noticed hesitation among Celira's officers. Some feared failure. Others doubted the unconventional methods. He acted quickly, reinforcing confidence through example, demonstrating calmness and making decisions that balanced risk with creativity. Slowly, the hesitant began to trust, seeing the effectiveness of his guidance. Hours passed, and the Loyalist fleet was forced to retreat. They had underestimated both the Queen and the last human. Victory had not come from brute strength alone, but from intelligence, adaptability, and unity. After the battle, the flagship drifted in relative calm. Systems were stable, and Celira's officers had a new respect for her and for Eli. The Queen approached him, her sword dimmed but still humming faintly. "You have changed me," she said softly. "I see now that leadership is more than strength. It is observation, creativity, and the courage to act differently. Humans, they are remarkable. Show me everything humans know, not for war but for understanding, for survival, and for wisdom." He understood that survival was not just about physical strength or technology, but about knowledge, flexibility, and ethical action. Over the next few hours, Eli and Celira worked side by side, improving the ship's systems, creating adaptive strategies, and teaching her officers to think differently. Each lesson built confidence, not just in Celira, but in her crew. They began to see that the human approach, though unfamiliar, was effective. By the end of the day, the flagship was fully operational. Eli stood at the viewport, looking out at the stars, feeling the weight of what had occurred. He had faced threats that could have destroyed him or ended Celira's reign, yet through observation, adaptation, and human ingenuity, they had survived. Celira joined him silently, her sword resting at her side. "You are the last human," she said softly, "and yet you carry the strength of a species, not in power but in mind, heart, and spirit. And even in a galaxy that has forgotten us, it can continue." The galaxy was vast and full of danger, but Eli knew that together they could face whatever came next. Humans had survived impossible odds for millennia, and though he was the last, he carried their wisdom and spirit. Through teaching, guiding, and inspiring, humanity's essence could influence a new era, even among the stars. For the first time in decades, Eli allowed himself to feel hope, not only for himself, but for the possibility that the ideas, creativity, and morality of humanity could endure through others. Survival was no longer just a personal matter. It was a mission to ensure that humanity's legacy would live on in a universe that had forgotten it. And so, as the flagship glided silently through space, Eli Draven, the last human, prepared for the challenges ahead, knowing that knowledge, ingenuity, and the human spirit were the most powerful weapons in the galaxy. Eli Draven stood on the observation deck of Celira's flagship, the stars stretching endlessly before him. He had spent weeks teaching the alien queen the lessons of humanity, strategy, adaptability, ethics, and ingenuity. Every day had tested his patience, his knowledge, and his resolve, yet he felt a sense of fulfillment he had not known in decades. He was the last human, but his legacy had begun to take root. Celira approached silently, her sword sheathed but still humming faintly with energy. Her expression was thoughtful, even solemn. "Tomorrow we face the coalition," she said. "They will not accept the changes I have made. They will challenge my leadership and everything we have built. You have learned this, and now you must act upon it." He instructed Celira's officers in unconventional tactics, how to anticipate enemy movements, how to manipulate perception, and how to use innovation to overcome seemingly superior forces. Slowly, he saw the soldiers' attitudes shift. They began to trust, not just in Celira's authority, but in the human lessons that had guided her. The following day, the enemy fleet appeared on the sensors. It was vast, organized, and ruthless. Their intent was clear: to crush Celira's forces, eliminate dissent, and restore rigid control. Yet Eli did not feel fear. Humans had faced extinction, planets had burned, and yet they survived. Strategy, intelligence, and the ability to adapt had always been the key. "Divide and mislead," Eli instructed Celira as they moved to the command center. They expect conventional tactics. We will give them unpredictability. Their greatest strength is structure. We will make them doubt every move. The fleet responded seamlessly, ships moving in deceptive patterns, creating illusions of weakness and luring enemy forces into traps. The battle began. Laser beams cut through space, energy shields flared, and explosions illuminated the void. Yet Eli's strategies proved effective. Enemy commanders, trained to anticipate rigid patterns, were thrown off by the unconventional tactics. Celira's fleet struck precisely where weaknesses appeared, dividing the enemy and exploiting confusion. Eli observed every movement, anticipating enemy reactions, adjusting plans in real time. He guided Celira to use her sword as both symbol and tool, projecting energy fields that disrupted attacks and reinforced defenses. The combination of human creativity and Thrin technology was unprecedented. Hours passed. The battle raged with intensity, each side adapting, each testing limits. Yet Eli noticed the effects of human ingenuity manifesting. Officers who had doubted were now inspired, making independent yet strategic decisions. Ships previously ineffective were redeployed with innovative maneuvers, and Celira herself moved with an understanding of risk, reward, and consequence that no being in her empire had ever demonstrated. Finally, the enemy fleet faltered. Confusion spread among their ranks as they realized that their expectations of strength and obedience had been subverted. Celira's forces pressed the advantage, striking decisively, yet with precision, avoiding unnecessary destruction. Human lessons of restraint and foresight had been applied on a galactic scale. When the battle ended, the flagship floated silently among the stars. The enemy had retreated, their command structure disrupted, their morale broken. Celira turned to Eli, her expression a mixture of triumph, relief, and admiration. "You have changed everything," she said. "Not through force, but through knowledge, insight, and understanding. Humans, they are remarkable indeed. Humans survive by thinking, by adapting, by understanding consequences. That is all. Yet it is enough to endure where others fail." He taught her officers to value judgment alongside obedience, to consider the long-term consequences of their actions, and to recognize that strength alone did not ensure stability. Slowly, cracks in the old hierarchy healed, replaced by respect for intelligence and adaptability. Celira absorbed every lesson, applying them with precision. She transformed from a queen defined solely by conquest into a leader defined by wisdom and understanding. Eli observed the changes, feeling a rare sense of pride. Humanity, though extinct in numbers, had influenced the course of an entire alien empire. One evening, Eli and Celira stood together at the observation deck, watching stars drift past. Silence stretched between them, comfortable and profound. "You have carried humanity farther than I imagined possible," Celira said softly. "Even though your kind is gone, your mind, your spirit, your lessons, they endure. You are proof that those lessons can continue, even in a species far stronger than we were." He had taught her strategy, improvisation, and morality, yet there was more: art, empathy, curiosity, imagination. Humans had excelled not only in survival but in creating meaning, connection, and progress. He realized that even as the last human, he could extend humanity's influence through her. "You will learn," he said, his voice calm and certain. "Not to dominate, but to guide. Humanity's strength lies not in power, but in thought, creativity, and understanding. If you carry that forward, it will shape the galaxy in ways no weapon ever could." Her fleet operated not merely with obedience, but with initiative and insight. The ripple of change spread outward, reaching distant worlds and influencing those who had never encountered humans. Eli observed all of it with quiet satisfaction. He had survived countless battles, faced extinction, and endured solitude beyond measure. Yet now his efforts ensured that humanity's essence would continue. Knowledge, morality, and creativity had become a force greater than any weapon. One evening, Celira approached him with her sword in hand, a faint smile playing across her features. "You are the last human," she said. "Yet through you, the galaxy has seen the power of your kind. What do you wish for now?" "That is our greatest legacy." He was the last human, yes, but his influence would stretch far beyond his own lifetime. Through Celira and the Empire she would lead, humanity's ingenuity, morality, and creativity would shape the future. The flagship drifted silently through space, a beacon of hope and resilience. Eli stood with Celira, watching distant stars twinkle like points of promise. The galaxy was vast, full of challenges and unknowns, yet he knew that humanity's spirit, though carried by a single individual, would endure. And in that moment, Eli Draven, the last human, felt the truth of everything he had taught. Humanity did not survive through force alone, but through intelligence, adaptability, and the courage to guide others. In Celira, he had found a vessel for that legacy, a living testament to what humans could achieve, even when gone. The stars stretched endlessly before them, but for the first time in centuries, Eli felt hope not only for himself but for the universe. The last human had done more than survive. He had ensured that humanity's essence would live on, shaping civilizations, inspiring leaders, and leaving a mark that no conqueror, no weapon, no time could erase. And as Celira raised her sword not as a weapon but as a symbol of guidance, she spoke softly, almost reverently, "Teach me more, last human. Teach me everything,"